Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the G and Finn Show, coming to you live here on 92.1 Rebel Radio from Oxford, Mississippi. It's a beautiful Monday afternoon. I'm your host, George Agiro, with my co-host,
John Finnegan.
And right before we get started, talking about the great sports from this weekend, just want to remind everybody, come out to Bishop Hall right outside the front door by the Student Media Center. We have a little mini golf when you say contest going on. You get 2 shots to make a nice hole-in-one. You'll get free bowling passes to Premier Lanes here, and you could win some tickets to Mempho Fest up in Memphis this weekend. That's going to be at Shelby Farms. There's a great lineup. Other than that, let's just hop right into it. What do you have for this weekend, John?
So, obviously, first priority is going to be Ole Miss on the road in Columbia, Missouri. Mizzou took that one 38-27, and what I really saw, we talked a heck of a lot on Friday about this Missouri defense, one of the best by S&P, looked like top 5 in just about every critical metric. I didn't see as much of that Missouri defense as I expected. Maybe that was because they were missing a key player. Maybe that was just because the Ole Miss offense is a little different than what they've seen, or maybe they've been playing bad teams. But what came out of nowhere to me was the Missouri offense.
Yeah, that's the thing, is when you talk up a defense like that, and sure, they are missing their starting middle linebacker, who has been fantastic all year. He's even one of their top point producers. Their offense, the Ole Miss defense got torched, which isn't something that we've said often this year, except against Alabama.
And this
got lit up.
Yeah, this isn't an Alabama-level offense, and they put up 11 fewer points than Alabama, I want to say? Or no, what did Alabama put up?
I think that was 52, I believe, something like that.
So,
it was high.
Even 38 and 52 that's just a difference of 2 touchdowns.
In the grand scheme of things, that's not much. That's not a huge point differential between those 2 games.
Of course significant, but the Alabama game was a blowout. That's behind a guy named Tua Tagovailoa, and that's going to happen to anything but a fantastic defense. But yeah, so that Missouri offense came out of nowhere to me. One of the most interesting facets of the game to me was the Ole Miss quarterback situation. And this is I don't want to call it a controversy, but I feel like it came out of nowhere. Corral got hurt, and it's like, all right, we put in our second stringer. But it's become a little more complicated than that. If you didn't get a chance to watch the game, we came out with Plumlee. Couple drives later, we plugged in Corral for some deeper passes. And then in the second half, there were drives where we would switch them out mid-drive after a first down. And normally, I'm not a big fan of that. Normally, I'd say you've either got your guy or you don't. If you're putting in a running quarterback versus a passing guy, they're always going to know what you're doing, or at least what you're trying to do. But it kind of worked. It didn't work perfectly, but it kind of worked. Even when they could sniff out a QB draw, Plumlee was the fastest guy on the field all night. Corral threw pretty well. I believe he was 10 for 16. Didn't throw a touchdown, but didn't throw an interception either, something like 130 yards, playing maybe half the game. How'd you feel about switching out quarterbacks mid-game or even mid-drive?
For a Rich Rod offense, especially the way that they've been playing so far this year, I really think it's an interesting move by Rich Rod and Matt Luke to use both quarterbacks, especially in the way that they did, because it wasn't all just Corral, you pass it, or Plumlee, you run it. It wasn't that. There was a good mix of, the offensive talent that we've got. I really liked it, actually. It was something that was different. It's something you don't usually see, and I really do think at points it kept the Mizzou defense off balance because both those guys are mobile. Both those guys have a strong arm. Corral, some of those passes he were throwing, those were A++ passes.
Yeah, they were fantastic.
Those were very nice throws a lot of the time. Now, of course, they both had a couple mishaps. Just one in particular to me that stuck out. Keeping in mind the throwing for Plumlee, he was only 8 of 17, which is a pretty poor percentage.
But that's also about 46, 47%, and that's what Missouri defense has been holding teams to all year.
Yeah, you're not wrong with that.
But still not what we want to see.
Exactly. It's not something you want to see out of the guy who very well could be your starting quarterback. It's one of those things where I really feel like the amount of yardage that Plumlee put up when it comes to his throws were mostly yards after catch, especially by Elijah Moore, who had himself a night. He was awesome.
Yeah, that's what I saw. For me, the takeaways on the switching up of the quarterbacks, 8 for 17, not good, and a couple just I had no idea what he was really going for there. But what I really liked and what I think could keep defenses off balance is one of the first plays on a Plumlee drive beginning of the game, and I forget who it was completed to, but something like a 25 or 27 yarder down the sideline on one of the first throws Plumlee had. And I think the Missouri defense had to take a step back and say, all right, maybe this kid can throw it, or at the very least they're going to try to, and that forced them to play honest even with a very, very run-heavy quarterback. I think if there's any offensive coordinator in the country who's going to be able to take advantage of a system like this to keep their opponents off balance, I think it's Rich Rodriguez.
No doubt. I think the play you might be referencing was the Scotty Phillips touchdown, actually, at the end of that second drive.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It was that wheel route.
That was just such a nice wheel by Phillips. And, I mean, that's the thing with Scotty Phillips is he's just such a good two-way back. He can catch the ball. He can run routes. That's obvious now if they haven't used him like that much before. But that was just such a nice throw by Plumlee. I mean, it was only 20 yards, but it was into the end zone. It was to a smaller target than he's used to.
You do need to be careful throwing to a 5'8" guy coming out of the backfield, because if that throws a little bit high, that's getting picked.
No doubt, especially in the end zone where he's going to be either single or double covered. Luckily, Phillips is just quick. He's just quicker than the safety that they put on him, or they had Spy, because I don't think they were expecting a wheel route from a running back.
They had a Spy. I don't think anyone. I think they needed two overtop safeties, one of them to come down, and no one did in time.
But that's the thing. The Ole Miss offense, it looked good for the most part. The run game it got established, but it didn't get established with the running back group that we've got.
No, I think
Ely, Phillips, and Snoop Connor all got shut down.
It felt like they forgot to give the ball to Jerry Neely for most of the game. And I feel like I think in a couple different games, they're like, oh yeah, we've got this guy in the backfield. We can give him the ball. We're in a weird situation with our running back room where we've got one veteran workhorse guy in Scotty Phillips that was one of the better running backs in the conference last year. But then we've got a running quarterback who's been taking the majority of snaps. We've got guys like Snoop Connor and Jerry Neely, both very, very good. It's a weird spot where we have almost so much depth we don't know who to plug in. Like last year, it was, hey, if we need a run play, it's going to Scotty unless something's weird. But this year, it's, whose skill set could be fit to this play? Who do we have on the field? Who needs a couple snaps rest? So it was a weird spot, but I think the Ole Miss offense looked pretty good against a defense that's supposed to be very, very good, among the best in the country. I'm happy with that performance offensively. But what I'm not as happy with is two things. One, our defense getting absolutely torched, and two, ball security.
Oh, gosh. The ball security was just not it. It was really poor, to be honest. Sure, they didn't throw any interceptions, which that's what you have to expect is for somebody to throw an interception. Just a poor ball just gets picked off, or a good read from a defensive back. But this time it was all fumbles. Ole Miss had 3 fumbles, all 3 by quarterbacks. All 3 were quarterbacks on a designed run as well. So obviously the Mizzou defense was doing something to get that ball out. Ole Miss was lucky to only have one go the other way. And that was one of Plumlee's.
Those are
fumbles.
the reason this game was a lot closer than it could have been. If we lose a couple of those they were getting points. This is a team that's getting points off turnovers, giving themselves a great field position. We would have seen a much rougher final score if those were to go the other way. And you know what? When a fumble hits the ground, usually it goes to the defense, just because you've got guys facing that direction. But we got lucky on that, and we got bailed out. But one thing that's important to consider is if you've got a running back who's fumbling it multiple times a game, they'd get crucified for something like that. That's not something that's acceptable for any normal ball carrier. When you've got a quarterback and you look at their stat line and say, oh, they didn't throw any interceptions, you forget that if he's running the ball, he needs to act like the ball carrier he wants to be. It's another challenge. It adds a lot to your game, but it's another challenge, and it's something that's important.
I think that's even more important when you realize how much Plumlee actually ran the ball compared to our running backs. For example, this game, Plumlee took 23 rushing attempts compared to, let's see here, Scotty Phillips with 7, Snoop Connor with 5, and Jerry and Ely with 6.
And Plumlee did not play every single snap either.
No, he didn't.
And these were designed runs. Most of them weren't like, oh, the play broke down, I see an opening, let me scramble for it. These were designed runs. He's running the ball an awful lot. It excites me, but it also worries me because when you've got a quarterback, once in a while, if you're not sliding, which he doesn't slide.
No, he
He's
takes hits head on.
He didn't learn that during the Alabama game. I think he's going to take one good hit by the end of this year and realize, all right, maybe it's time for me to start protecting myself, because he's driving for the first down. There was one play in particular, and I was at the library this weekend. I remember one guy yelled, "That's my quarterback," because he just put his shoulder down for the first down. Got a couple yards more than he should have, but I was surprised he was so quick to get up after it.
It's one of those things where, the rules are in place to protect quarterbacks simply because they're really what bring the sport to life. And he's just not utilizing that. Sure, a lot of the times you see smart running from him if he's going down the sideline and he decides to just take a step out of bounds instead of really trying to push for more yardage. But all these runs up the middle and these design draws, he's taking some big shots, and it'll just take one to really, really ring his bell and then make him learn, hey, these rules are in place to protect me. I need to, use that.
Because you know what? Once the quarterback gets downfield, there are guys, and not even dirty plays, but when a linebacker sees a quarterback scramble, they're like, you know what? I want to put this dude in the dirt. And for the guys in the Southeastern Conference, they are more than capable of doing that to an 18-year-old.
And thing is, that brings up another point for me with this game. Just the officiating itself for the entire game was not good. It was an SEC crew. This is an SEC matchup. But just overall, sure, there were some things that were consistent. That's, the ball.
The ball spotting was
spotting
terrible.
was awful. There were so many times where you would see, oh, that's short. No, they gave like an extra yard and a half on almost every run or every catch.
Yep.
But thing is, that was consistent. That was for both sides.
Yeah, so the ball spotting bothered me, but not as an Ole Miss fan, just as a fan of the game. It's like, you know what? Get those things right. I'm sure it all came out in the wash at the end of the day, but come on. It's a multi-billion-dollar sport. I know the players aren't getting paid, but this makes millions of dollars, games like these. And come on, you can't do a little better than having some 60-year-old man just pick up the ball and be like, it looks like a bad there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, that's a human element of the game, but at the same time, you don't want the officials to end up inserting themselves into the game to the point to where it makes a difference with the score and it makes a difference in the outcome of the game. That's not their job. Their job isn't to dictate which way the game swings. It's their job to make sure that the rules are being followed and nobody's getting hurt. That's their main job.
Their job is to make sure the players can play. I don't want to say the officiating made a difference. I don't feel that it did entirely. But
No.
I think penalties absolutely did make a difference. There were a couple questionable ones. I don't want this to be a show where we complain about the officiating and say we'd be undefeated if it weren't for the darn refs. But Rebs took 7 penalties for 75 yards, 2 ejections, 1 targeting call that was understandable. It looked like targeting to me.
That was on linebacker Sam Williams.
And then another targeting call. That was one of the couple calls that I really didn't love. I mean, I saw some Missouri offensive linemen what looked like it could have been holding. Maybe they just had a much better line than I expected. But this targeting call, it was. Remind me who this was. Was it Jacquez Jones?
Yeah, that was Jacquez Jones getting a good lick on Kelly Bryant.
So went for a relatively moderate height tackle, normal standard form tackle, leading with the shoulder. Kelly Bryant slid, but at that point it was a little too late for him to change where he was tackling and wound up being helmet to helmet. Looked bad if you didn't know when Kelly Bryant slid, but both players wound up being ejected for targeting, so 15 yards each time, disqualified for the remainder of the game. And since it happened in the second half, both disqualified for the first half of the game this upcoming weekend against Texas A&M.
Yeah, to me that's the even worse part of it is the fact that, I understand why they ejected Sam Williams and Jacquez Jones. I understand why, because textbook it was targeting. However, I think you have to contextualize it a little bit when you decide to make the decision to not just penalize a player, but penalize and eject a player. Because, yes, I understand the quarterback is allowed to slide. That rule is in place so that the quarterback can protect themselves. However, I don't understand how you can penalize a defensive player for initiating a tackle in good timing. However, the quarterback is the one whose timing was off. I don't understand that. Because in this play, Kelly Bryant decided to slide way too late for Jacquez Jones to change his trajectory. He had already launched. He'd already made the decision, hey, I'm going for Kelly Bryant. Thing is, Kelly Bryant's not a small man. He's 6'3". He's a sizable quarterback and a sizable person. So for this hit, it would have been probably, what do you think, waist, chest level? It would have just been a normal hit, right?
And, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It looked like he was going for a normal tackle since the quarterback slid late because they're given those advantages to protect them because they take a lot of hits otherwise. And I understand the reasoning behind protecting quarterbacks a bit. Plus, they're the marketable guys like you mentioned earlier. It's the same in the NFL. But I think there does need to be some subjectivity to it. I understand the need to eliminate these brutal head-to-head, crown-of-the-helmet kind of hits. This wasn't one of those. It wound up being helmet-to-helmet contact, so I understand the call. But when a guy slides very late after the tackle has already been initiated, there's nothing you can do at that point. And it all happens fast, and only the quarterback knew he was going to slide. So it's upsetting. That's one of those things, like not even sarcastically, but you do hate to see it. One of the most frustrating parts of it to me is we're losing a full hour of player time from good linebackers for the first half of the game this weekend, which could be a big game.
I mean, that's the thing. It will be a big game, realistically. With a loss here, the only way that I see the Rebels going to a bowl game is with a win against Texas A&M this weekend.
Yeah, I don't see another path to it.
There really isn't. I mean, LSU at this point is number 2 in the country.
And for good reason.
Exactly. For good reason. I mean, that team just front to back is incredible. I mean, Florida had one of the top scoring defenses in the country going into Death Valley. The kicker, they gave up 42 points. I don't see a way for beating LSU. I don't see a way to beat Auburn unless somehow Bo Nix just regresses in, 2 or 3 weeks' time. I just don't see any other way other than beating A&M. And without 2 of the starting linebackers, and they're already missing a linebacker too, missing Momo Sanogo since the first game of the year.
Yeah, they're going to be running it up the gut at the beginning of the game. I'd be very surprised to see it not work. So that's one thing that, and we'll get more in detail when we've got our injury report and we've got a little more scouting done on this A&M team. That's something we'll get into this Friday. But I completely agree. It's got to be. I mean, we're on the second half of the season now. We've got only a few more games to get 3 more wins, and at this point, that's got to be one of them. So we'll get into that more on Friday. So Ole Miss, again, taking 7 penalties for 75 yards, 2 ejections, and Missouri only 2 penalties for 26 yards. I don't want to blame the officiating for everything, but we couldn't make a comeback. We gave up an awful lot of points in the third quarter. What was it, 23? 23
points in a third quarter, which for any team, that's just incredible to give up that many points in a single quarter. Some teams don't give that up in a half, and other teams don't give up that in a whole game.
And that was more than the points we gave up in the other 3 quarters combined.
Yep.
Is there something in particular you want to blame that on? Do you think it was us failing to make halftime adjustments, Missouri doing a very good job of it, were our guys gassed? Do you have any idea why that could have been such an ugly third quarter for Ole Miss?
I mean, I've got to give it up to... I'll honestly give more credit to Missouri's coaching staff and just the way that they changed. It was a mix of their change of scheme along with a change of, I can't say personnel, but they just decided to spread out the ball a little bit more, and they changed the way that they were moving the ball. Kelly Bryant played a great game, 23 of 35 for 329 yards, a pick, and a touchdown. But I really think this game came down to Larry Roundtree, who... We mentioned him on Friday. We didn't think he'd be necessarily a key to the game because we expected the Rebel defense to do a better job of stopping the run. But in that second half, you saw the offensive line for Mizzou start creating holes in different places. Instead of creating holes on the inside, they started creating holes more towards the outside with the tackles and guards instead of the center and the guards. Roundtree would take that hole and cut into the middle.
And it would work.
It would work. And the thing is, it worked almost every time because at that point, as a linebacker, if you see a hole, your first instinct is stuff the hole, block that hole. At that point, though, with a player like Roundtree, once he hits that, makes that cut inside, the linebacker's too late. I think that's where he picked up a lot of his yardage. He had a great game, 21 carries, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
And one thing that I think might have been, maybe it was a halftime adjustment, maybe it was something Missouri just started being able to execute on in the second half. But first half, he was getting touches, he was getting plenty of them, and he was getting 2, 3, 4 yards. He was doing fine. He was doing his job as a running back, getting a couple yards every time. But whatever it was, the offensive guards were getting blocks that went up to the second level. And they were making those 2, 3, 4-yard physical runs. They were turning those into 8, 9, 15 more. So I think that was something that Missouri did very well in the second half, was getting those blocks up to the second level and getting past the linebackers instead of just barely making it past the defensive line.
At this point, I don't know that there is really much else to say about this game other than the fact that it was a good showing from Ole Miss, especially that they showed their resiliency. They tried to come back valiantly in that fourth quarter. Their fourth quarter was where they put up the most points.
It didn't feel like the game was ever over.
No, it really didn't. It always felt like this was going to be a back-and-forth affair, even after Mizzou had a sizable lead.
Yeah, even in the third, when we were starting to pull away, all of a sudden, beginning of the fourth, Ole Miss drives down and scores. So it felt good. The team didn't give up, which is a problem Ole Miss teams have had in the past. And for good reason, because we've shown a real lack of capability to close games in the past few years. That's something a lot of the older guys are used to not having. But I think that's really all I've got to say. We showed promise. It was a good game. Tough loss, but, like Belichick would say, we're on to A&M. So I think we're going to take a quick break right here, but if you're still around on campus near Bishop Hall, come by the mini golf tournament. It'll still be going on in front of Bishop until 1 o'clock today, but we'll be right back after just a few. And welcome back to the G and Finn Show. We're going to get into it with a little bit of NFL this past weekend, and we're going to get into a little bit of ALCS, NLCS action. George, what was your game to watch this weekend, this Sunday?
My game to watch, normally I would have said the Tua Bowl, but that was just because that would have been awful football. But I was actually really intrigued by the Seahawks and Browns game. That was in Seattle. Russell Wilson. I don't think there's much else to say about that game. I mean, look, Baker Mayfield has already thrown 11 interceptions.
That is the most by a Browns quarterback in the past 11 years.
Yeah.
Through the number of games in the season for a Browns quarterback in the last 11 years.
That's including guys like Cody Kessler.
And still, 32-28 Seahawks victory. Russell Wilson, your MVP candidate right now, he's a clear front runner in my eyes.
I mean, that's the thing. For me, it's a two-horse race. I love Russell Wilson. I've been harsh on him before, but the way he's playing right now is just awesome. He's just pulling the team essentially on his back. He's just carrying this team. It's either him or Christian McCaffrey right now. McCaffrey has just been a man possessed.
Yeah, and CMC is probably, if I had to go with a non-quarterback, for me it's far and away Run CMC. But, they're both guys who are taking their team and they're really epitomizing what it means to be the MVP. They are the most valuable player on that team. It would be the Seahawks without Russell Wilson would have no offense, except DK Metcalf, just make him a fullback.
Oh, yeah. Just put him anywhere.
The Panthers without McCaffrey, I don't know what they'd do. He had more, going into this week, he had more scrimmage yards than the New York Jets did. And granted, the Jets were missing tons of key pieces, but he had more yards than an NFL team. He's one man. So I think whichever one, it might come down to which team has the better record at the end of the year. I think it's going to be the Seahawks. Yeah. But that's just because, you want to be, the MVP very often goes to a team that's winning a lot of games. If you're really the most valuable player, you're a game-changing guy, you're one that's making a difference of at least a couple games a year. So far, both of those guys, Wilson and McCaffrey, are doing it. But, I'd be real excited to see a running back take the MVP. Because, you get Offensive Player of the Year, you get Defensive Player of the Year.
But that's not the same as an MVP.
It's so often quarterback. But for most valuable player, right now it's still Russ for me. But McCaffrey might be OPOY for me, if I had to choose.
And, also just from this game, can we talk about the little dance that the Seahawks did
that was
after
something
that touchthing.
That was a thing of beauty.
That. It was gorgeous.
If you didn't see it, after. I forget who it was that went in. It wasn't our boy, but
No,
he
I
did
think it was,
participate.
I think it was Jaron Brown who had the 2
Yeah,
touchdowns.
I think you're right. He went off. He had a great game.
Yeah, he had a great game. 3 catches, 29 yards, but 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, difference maker in the red zone.
There you go.
But, yeah, if you didn't get to see it, it was 4 Seahawks after a score, went in, lined up, and they had a little NSYNC action, just bye. And perfectly synced up. One of the sports writers on Twitter perfectly synced it with the music. It was a thing of beauty. It's I'm liking the Seahawks team. They're a lot of fun to watch. We, of course, get to watch our large Terminator sun light it up over in the NFC. Beyond that, probably the best game of the weekend, in my opinion, Texans-Chiefs.
Oh, yeah. That was just a great game, very back and forth. I mean, just from the jump of the ball, just from that first quarter, I mean, you see the Chiefs hop all over the Texans. It's 17-3 at the end of the first. Chiefs go scoreless in the second quarter. Meanwhile, the Texans put up 20 to take the lead. It was just a thing of beauty from both quarterbacks, really.
Yeah, and final score, Texans 31, Chiefs 24. But, man, was that fun to watch. I mean, whenever you get to see 2 electric quarterbacks like Watson and Mahomes go up against each other, it was great. What I think is going to be a little scary for other teams, and I know they lost to a pretty good Texans team. I know they lost, but the Chiefs' defense looked pretty good.
Yeah, they didn't look bad at all,
Forced a couple turnovers, swatted away a couple passes, and, man, Watson's going to have a heck of a game in one of the next couple weeks. I'm not sure who Houston's going up against, but, man, defenses better watch out because that kid's the real deal.
The thing is with this is Deshaun Watson, on paper, his line looks a lot worse than it actually was. He threw 30 of 42, which that in itself, that's a great completion percentage for 280 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. The 2 picks are the only thing that's worrying to me about that. But at the end of the day, Watson also, ran for 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's a game-changer kind of guy. If he can reel in those interceptions, and when you've got a guy like Hopkins, maybe you get a little trigger-happy. Maybe you think back to in practice, hey, last time I just threw it up to my guy Hopkins, and he came down with it in triple coverage. You can't do that with every receiver on the team. You can do it with Hopkins. You can't do it with everybody. Maybe he gets a little trigger-happy on things like that. But can we talk about the added protection he's got in Laramie Tunsil?
I mean, here's my thing. I have a whole lot to say about this, specifically because of how bad that trade was for the Dolphins. Just overall, I don't know what the Dolphins are doing. Here's why. It looks like they're trying to get a young quarterback, and in the draft this year. The thing is, they just went out and used assets to go and get a young quarterback in Josh Rosen, who, by the way, is not a bad quarterback by any means. Sure, he could learn a system, but
he's been put into one of the worst situations I've ever seen a quarterback put into.
Twice. Not once, but twice.
He has learned 3 systems in his past 3 years of playing football. At UCLA, he had a new coach in Jim Mora. Then he's over in Arizona, new system. Now he's in Miami, new system, and it looks like they're going to draft a guy to replace him. At least that's what people are thinking early. So if you're a Josh Rosen fan, if you're a Josh Rosen hater, don't look at these past couple of years. Just hope he can get put in a good situation. He's a good quarterback. There's a reason he got drafted so high. There's a reason he made a record-breaking comeback against Texas A&M a couple of years ago. Just hold your judgment on this Josh Rosen kid because we have not seen what he can do yet. Will he be good in the league? Maybe. Will he be bad in the league? Maybe. But it's way too early to see. But I'm completely with you, and I know the Dolphins are trying to have like a fire sale, complete, tear-it-down, rebuild year. But in every successful rebuild, you see the guy they build around. The Colts tried to build around Luck. They got Luck before they had a line, before they had weapons. By the time they built a line and got him somebody to throw the ball to or hand the ball to, that was this year. By then, Luck's out of the league now because they didn't give him a way to not get sacked on every single play. That's the reason he's out of the league. In every successful rebuild, you need to have a couple key guys that you got lucky by getting that you build around. A franchise left tackle is one of those guys.
And that's the thing. It really is a shame for Josh Rosen because his main concern coming into the draft, it was never his intellect, it was never his arm, it was his health. And now that he's just been under duress And, I mean, for the Cardinals last year, he was their starting quarterback. He got hit more than any other quarterback in the NFL. Now, as the backup-ish for Ryan Fitzpatrick with the Dolphins, he's getting
By the way,
hit.
yeah, he played the first 3 quarters against the Redskins and then pulled for Fitzpatrick in the 4th.
Yep, keeping in mind Fitzpatrick decided, you know what, I'm not losing this game. He did his darndest to get the Dolphins that win. They were within 1 at the end of the game.
Yeah, you know what? And if you didn't catch the game, it was 17-10 Redskins with about a minute left. Dolphins went in and scored, decided to go for a 2, ran a wide receiver screen, I want to say.
It
looked like a
short
wide receiver
pass.
screen, but it went to the tight end, dropped just on the 2-point conversion, tried to put the game away. Not an awful game of football. I mean, they were somewhat evenly matched teams, as bad as they've been against other competition.
They were equally bad. I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, Redskins came away. I respect them going for 2 if you want to trust your offense or if you just really, really did intentionally want to lose the game, which it almost looked like, and I hate saying teams are doing that. I don't think teams do that very often at all. But even in tear-it-down rebuild mode, I respect what the Dolphins did there. I just don't get the trade to the Texans of Laramie Tunsil. That's one of the guys you build around.
It wasn't even just Tunsil. They traded Stills as well.
Yeah.
That's one of their was one of their only, that was one of their top receivers apart from Devontae Parker. And I mean, they lost Landry a year ago.
Yeah.
Like, that leaves...
They have no one left.
They realistically are already at rock bottom, and they're
Kenyon
trying
Drake?
to move more. Yeah, but, like, is Kenyon Drake even an RB1?
No.
I don't think, like,
He
just not.
used to be, and he could have been, and Gase tried his best to make him one.
But he's just not. That's not what he is. That's not what you can't force him into that mold, which is what they're trying to do.
No,
it's
he's
the
got
same
a-
thing they're doing with all of their players right now. It's just a shame.
And he's got a good skill set. They just never built to it. They wanted him to be a every down back. That's just not the kind of player he is, and they should have played better to his strengths. But over on the Texans, Tunsil this game allowed 0 sacks, 0 QB hurries, 0 QB pressures. Exceptional game from the kid a couple years out of Ole Miss.
That's the thing. You expect that out of a left tackle who is that highly touted. Sure, he had a little bit of a problem at the draft and a little bit of a problem playing in Miami. But you see what happens when you give him an opportunity to really show his skill set. And this is what you get. You get a left tackle who's a star. You get a left tackle who obviously knows what he's doing, can perform, and then he just does it. I don't think I will see any of these Dolphins players from this year truly perform or break out until they're either on another team or just fed up.
Or on a completely reinvigorated Dolphins team. Which we could see, but not for another year or 2.
It really is a shame because realistically, the way that the Dolphins are doing this is going to end someone's career.
Absolutely.
I think that's just the worst part of it all.
Is what that locker room's like, knowing
I can
you're
only
playing
imagine.
you're playing the game, you're just getting tackled day in and day out, not even trying to win the game, just so they can get somebody better because you're not good enough. But outside of Miami, we've got just a couple more brief games of interest. Broncos shut out the Titans 16-0. Cardinals took down the Falcons, got an early lead, held on to it. Matt Bryant missed what would have been a game winner with a couple minutes left in the game. And then, in addition to the Redskins, the Jets tacked on their first win of the season against the Cowboys. Came out to an early 21-3 lead. Cowboys scratched it back, almost had to go for 2 with just about a minute left in the game. Did not convert. Lions travel to Lambeau Field to face the Packers tonight. And we've only got a few minutes left, so let's get into a little bit of playoff baseball.
Oh, I'm here for it. It's the ALCS. It's, if I'm not mistaken, the AL and NLCS. Excuse me. It's the CS series, but it's currently 1-1 going back to New York. Last night, Houston took that game in the 11th inning, 3-2. Carlos Correa was the MVP, I'd say, of that game, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, he decided he wanted to go to bed. The game ended at about 12:10 Central, which is the Eastern time zone, and so that's 1 a.m. for folks watching back home in New York. The Yanks did take Game 1 7-0. That game was, and honestly, not as close as the score makes it look.
It wasn't.
Game 2 that's one that's going to hurt the Yankees going forward just because they went through so much of their bullpen. They had Chapman pitch something like 25, 30 pitches. They wanted to have him come back in the 10th. And this was in the bottom of the 9th, tied up. There's a reason they say on the road you save your closer for when you're winning the game, and that's because they had to burn 2 more arms, and they've got a day of rest today, but they had to burn 2 more arms after the 9th inning after their closer. And over in the NL, the Nationals took Game 2, 3-1. That wasn't too exciting a game, but well pitched. It was look, if you're a Nats fan, you would have enjoyed watching it. If you're a neutral fan, probably not.
No, I mean, I watched most of that game. I didn't really get much from it, apart from the fact that this Nats team is a great mix of young talent and veteran talent. I mean, you've got Zimmerman, who's been around the block. You've got Strasburg and Scherzer, who have been around the block. But, I mean, you just inject that with guys like Juan Soto. It's just a lot of fun to watch when you look at it that way, because that team realistically could be good, down the stretch for a long time. And, I mean, the next game is tonight. That one is in Washington. That's at Nationals Park in the nation's capital. 2 good pitchers, actually, for this game. You've got Jack Flaherty and Steven Strasburg pitching. So this one could be another low-scoring matchup, but you really never know with both of these teams with the amount of bats that they both have. They're just 2 deep rosters.
And, of course, there are plenty more games to play, but if you're a Nationals fan, you got to be feeling good right now. You took both in St. Louis. Yankees kind of, one of the mentalities you get, unless you think you're going to blow out the other team, which none of these teams are blowing out any of their opponents right now, and they shouldn't be expecting to. But you want to, when you go on the road first, you want to split. The Yankees did their job there taking Game 1. Nationals took both away from the Cardinals. Now Cardinals have to go on the road, and they got to take one of them if they want to stay alive and head back to St. Louis. But who are your picks right now to win these series?
I mean, the thing is I'm expecting the next game to not go the Yankees' way. As much as I like Severino, he didn't play most of the year. He wasn't healthy. And he's going up against Garrett Cole, who, at this point,
he's in a class of his own.
I think he's the MVP. I legitimately think if the Houston Astros win, Garrett Cole should be the MVP, the World Series MVP, the playoff MVP. Doesn't matter. I mean, he's just mowing batters down, and he makes it look easy to the point where he'll pitch into the 8th inning and still be throwing 99, 100. His arm must be made out of rubber at this point, but it's working. And he's got a 4-tool skill set too. Like how often do you see a guy like that where he'll throw 99, 100? He's got a cutter, he's got a curve, he's got a slider.
That makes your job real hard no matter how good your offense is. Yeah, if I'm an Astros fan, I feel good at least heading into the game tomorrow, and we'll see how the series develops. But they do travel to New York for tomorrow. Game's at 3:08. But yeah, I think Nationals are looking good. They they might let the Cardinals steal one at home, but I mean they're showing they can show up against that team. Astros still looking good, and if you watch the game, the ALCS last night, you'd see a lot of Houston fans chanting MVP whenever Cole was coming out to play. And you know what? I was upset as a Yankees fan, but after watching him play a little bit, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I think I get it.
For Cole didn't play last night. That was
was Cole out last night?
Oh,
who were all the MVP? You can't blame him for that either.
If they were chanting, it was probably for Bregman.
That's what it was.
They just love Alex Bregman, and I can understand why.
It's hard not to.
He's a great guy off the field. He does so many philanthropic things in the community. He loves playing in Houston.
He's a Houston guy.
He is. I'll say this, even from third base, he's got a hose. It really doesn't matter where on the field you're running to or from. If he's got the ball in his hand, you better get back to whatever base you're going to.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You got anything else on playoff baseball today, George?
Playoff baseball today, just to finish out predictions, if there's any game St. Louis is going to steal, it's going to be this game today.
It has to be this game.
It's got to be this game today because this is their ace. Flaherty has been their ace all year. The next game they've got is they're throwing out their Dakota Hudson against Patrick Corbin, and Corbin has been lights out for the Nats. It's got to be this game for St. Louis, or it's going to be no games for St. Louis, in my opinion.
No, I hear you. So I think that's all we've got for our Monday show. We'll be back at 6 o'clock on Friday. We'll be talking, we'll have, obviously, our Thursday night football. We're going to have a little more playoff baseball to update you on, and, of course, another weekend of college football and the NFL. But until then, I've been John Finnegan.
And I've been George Ruggiero.
And this has been the G and Finn Show on Rebel Radio 92.1.